Good morning, and Chag Sameach Sukkot. I am Karen Flotte, and I serve as co-chair of Central Reform Congregation's Mitzvah Farm, which you see in the image behind me. First, I will offer some thoughts about the Mitzvah Farm and Sukkot, and then we'll have some special guests. During Sukkot, we invite guests, both living and deceased, called Ushbazim, into the Sukkah, people whose lives inspire us to act in audacious hope. This morning, a special guest whose life has been radically committed to prophetic hope will join us. We will close then with a song led by our own Rabbi Randy. The CRC Mitzvah Farm grows 1,500 pounds of organic vegetables and fruit for families enduring food insecurity and who get their groceries from Trinity Food Ministry, a few blocks from our synagogue. This week, we begin our final harvest of collard and mustard greens, turnips, and sweet potatoes. It's hard to believe we are already at this time of final harvest. As the rhythms of our lives have been disrupted the past 6 months, time itself seems out of sync and disjointed. Yet the cycles of the sun and moon, rhythms of the seasons, and our own holidays remain constant, grounding and nourishing us in this time. I am always amazed at how the rhythms of nature and our circle of holidays line up and resonate with each other, bringing depth and meaning to both. We planted our first crops during Pesach and counted the days by counting the Omer to first harvest near Shavuot. Now, as we build our Sukkot and begin the final harvest, I've been thinking a lot about that time of planting and counting. We are commanded to sit in the Sukkah so we remember the story of our ancestors, of liberation from Egypt, of vulnerability in the desert, and of becoming a people, with mitzvot outlining how we create a whole, healthy, and strong community. Our modern minds associate the word Omer with day, but it is actually a unit of measurement. Last spring, I studied with Rabbi Arthur Waskow. We studied the Torah portion immediately after the escape from Egypt. Our ancestors are in the wilderness, facing food insecurity, hunger, and ultimately starvation. They cry out, and God provides manna, instructing that each is to glean what they need for each day, not more, not less. The text says an omer per person. Here, an omer is a measurement of food sufficient to meet each person's nutritional needs, not more, not less. It is not a standard measurement in this case, like a pound or teaspoon, but a measure of what each person in the community requires for their health. For the first time this year, we packaged our produce at the Mitzvah Farm in family-sized portions, and I thought of this Torah portion as counting the Omer continues throughout the growing season as we weigh and carry Omers of produce to Trinity Food Ministry each week. CRC and the Mitzvah Farm team are committed to this work because we know that the health and wholeness of the entire community depends on the health and wholeness of each member of our community. Spending time in a sukkah, open to earth, sky, and community, changes our ability to see, hear, and connect with all living beings in our ecosystem, renewing our commitment to live in audacious hope. In a few short weeks, we will begin another type of counting, the counting of ballots, a time when we need to act in audacious hope for all living beings. Rabbi Arthur Waskow and the Shalom Center have created a special Sukkot Seder called Share Sukkot, Green and Grow the Vote, as a resource you can use as a Zoom-ready slideshow or a resource at your family gathering. It features rituals, poetry, music by Rabbi Randy, including his new Psalmish, and a text study connecting Sukkot and our election season this year. I'll put the web link in the comments below in our Facebook page. I'd like to now welcome Rabbi Arthur Waskow into our sukkah to talk about this work.
I'm delighted to be able to make contact with Central Reform Congregation again. A year ago, I was with you. Can you imagine the concept of actual hundreds of people being together in a single room, not wearing masks? Well, that's what it was like for Slichot. a year ago. And this is a lot less, but I'm still glad to be able to connect this way. And I want to wish you a Shana Tovah and a Shinui Tov. Shinui is from the same root as Shana. It means transformation. May this year be a year of transformation for the good, not stuck in the old cycle that has brought us such trouble in this past year. So it's Sukkot, and many people, I think, are taking a deep breath from their deep involvement in Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And yet, I think Sukkot is a really extraordinary festival, which we have done much less than we could have in the American Jewish community this past generation. It's a festival that honors our connection with the earth. And traditionally, when the temple still stood, there was an offering of 70 bulls, and the rabbi said, why 70? And they connected it with a kind of parable or something like that, that there were 70 nations of the world. And at Sukkot, we were praying for, acting for the abundance of all the 70 nations, not just our own. So here we are in a moment that is going to define American history for the next century. And given our impact on the planet, going to define what happens to the planet for the next century or more. And the values of Sukkot are to connect with the earth, to heal with the earth, to celebrate all the nations, and to grow. It's the harvest festival, to grow like your amazing garden, with communities that have mostly been cut off from fresh and healthy food, to grow with them. One of the great teachings of Torah is that you can't divide social justice from ecological sanity. And it turns out you can't divide racial injustice from ecological insanity. We are seeing both things clustered in the present government of the United States. And though I don't want to talk about individuals and parties, the issues are deeply connected. And the notion that every other year in American Jewish life, Sukkot comes just a few weeks before a national election, has stimulated us to think about share Sukkot, green, and grow the vote. It almost rhymes. The O in English and the O in Hebrew are quite the same, but pretty close. So I urge you to take seriously both the greening and the growing of the vote. That this is an urgent need. Even the Torah talks on 3 occasions about the whole people, absolutely the whole people are present at Sinai. Even the Torah goes to this mystical notion that it's the past and present, and the future, not just the present, that's at Sinai. And then when Moses is giving his farewell address, he says that every 7th year, the people, the whole people, must absolutely gather to reaffirm the Torah that they care about. And then when Nehemiah and Ezra return from exile in Babylon, and others with them, they meet the community. Wasn't all the then Jewish people that went to Babylon, in the death march to Babylon. They meet the people who had stayed behind, and they all gather and they vote on reaffirming the Torah. So we are in an election that important for the future of democracy and the future of living beings on this planet, possibly including the human species itself. So to mobilize voters, to make sure not only the people in the sight of me and the sound of my voice vote, but that you reach out to other people, reach out through the garden, reach out as far as you can to mobilize other people to vote. One of the things the Shalom Center has begun working on is the notion of the whole cycle of the Jewish festivals as a framework for public action to heal the earth. If we think about the festival cycle, it's the offspring of a love affair between the Jewish people and the earth. The festivals grew out of that love affair. And now Mother Earth is in serious trouble and she needs help from her children, the festivals, and her lover, the Jewish people. And we need to be giving that. Sukkot, Hanukkah, the festival of conservation of energy, right? 1 day's olive oil needs 8 days needs, and on through the entire festival cycle. We see the connections with the earth, and we can turn them into healing and protecting the earth in our own generation. So I hope that's what you all are doing now and will be doing through the year. One of the aspects of the book I just finished, it's the harvest of a lot of my life's work. And like a really good harvest, it's not about the past. It's intended to feed the future. It's called Dancing in God's Earthquake, the coming transformation of religion. And one of the things I talk about there is what it means for communities of faith, not only the Jews, but other communities of faith, to connect the urge for social justice with the urge to keep life flourishing on planet Earth. So I hope that and the possibility of your acting will cohere, connect. So again, Shana Tovah, Sukkot, Shalom, and Shinui Tov. A good year, a good Sukkot, a good time of transformation to the good. Once we pause for a moment, I'd like to invoke the blessing that comes from the tradition, especially to be used when we learn Torah together. The Kaddish, the Rabbanan, the Kaddish, which we use on many moments of transition, and the Kaddish of learning and teaching. In Hebrew, learning and teaching have the same root, makes total sense. Every time I teach, I learn. And every time I learn, I find myself teaching as well. And I think they're totally interconnected. So in the beginning of every Kaddish, we invoke Shmei Rabbah, the great name. And I spent years totally puzzled. What's the great name? What's your name? The great name. What? What does that mean? Until I visited the Vietnam War Memorial in Washington, which has about 60,000 names of the American dead in the war. I wish it would have been a lot more names if there had been the Vietnamese dead as well. But at least those 60,000 are there, and they make up one great name. And what that taught me was the great name, the name of all names is the name of all names. That infinite variety of identities that pervades the entire universe, every galaxy and every quark, every human being and every turtle, every redwood tree and every blade of grass has its own name, its own identity, its own being. And we are all linked into the great Echad, the great name. So let me invite you for Kaddish Rabbanan, focusing on learning and teaching. Let me invite you to remember some moments when you recall being taught, maybe by a human being, maybe by a cloud of fireflies some night, or a full moon, and give a name to that moment. And let several of them emerge from you, with you, in you, from you. And weave those names together. It's not a blip here and a blip there, but how are they connected? And then look at the moments when you were the teacher, the change maker. Maybe you taught human beings, children, students. Maybe you taught, changed, helped grow a tree, a garden. Maybe you cared for and protected an animal. And give names to those moments in your life when you were the teacher, the change maker. And weave them together with the other times that you remember. And now, lift up your own name and find just the right place in the pattern of the great name to place your own name. Be clear it belongs there. And then take the whole weave that you have woven and place it inside you. So you are part of the great name, and the great name is at the heart of you. So we do this, and we realize that our doing this together is a blessing. That we experience the blessing of chesed, of loving kindness, as we learn from, with, and to each other. That we experience the blessing of shalom, of wholeness, as we begin to integrate within ourselves what we have learned from our own speaking and other people's speaking. We recognize the blessing that we know there is work to do in the world. And we can do that work not on the back of Earth or the backs of other human beings, but as part of Earth and part of the human community. And we affirm the blessing that there is also time to be as well as to do, to laugh, to sing, to pray, to love. And the blessing of knowing that when we talk with each other, we are using the breath that is interwoven among all the living beings of this planet. The breath that goes from animal to plant and plant to animal. And we, speaking, breathe that great breath. that great breath that is the Holy One. And we say, inwardly or outwardly, by the magic of Zoom or our own room of loving connection. Amen.
Strong wind, deep water, tall trees, warm fire. I can feel them in my body, in my spirit, and in my soul. Hey ya, 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 hey. Adama v'shamayim, chom ha'esh, zlil ha'mayim, ani margisot begufi, veruchi uvanishmati. Hey ya, 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 hey ya. Strong wind, deep water, tall trees, warm fire. I can feel them in my body, in my spirit, and in my soul.